In this video, we are going to taste Grain Belt, one of the Midwest's most enduring beers.
Grain Belt Beer, Minneapolis, Omaha, and other thirsty places.
We all set on this thing then?
Sure, Jerry, we're all set. Why wouldn't we?
Grain Belt Beer.
This beer's been around for 130 years, and somehow it's still here. The story of Grain Belt begins in 1890 when four small breweries in Minnesota joined forces to form the Minneapolis Brewing and Malting Company. One of those was Orth Brewing Company, known back then for their quality and consistency. So you might be asking yourself, why the merger? They wanted to stand up to the big eastern breweries that were moving west. A few years later, in 1893, they launched Grain Belt Golden, a crisp, light lager brewed with Midwestern barley. The name came from, quote-unquote, the Grain Belt, the fertile farmland stretching across Minnesota and the upper Midwest. And it was not just marketing. The brewery sat on the Mississippi with easy access to rail and river transport for barley and wheat. What a great place to put a brewery. The brewery itself was a stunner. German-style brewhouse, Romanesque towers perched on the river in northeast Minneapolis. By the early 1900s, it was one of the largest breweries west of the Mississippi. By the 1910s, Grain Belt had become the beer of Minnesota and beyond. Its slogan, the friendly beer. Wasn't fancy, wasn't expensive, just dependable, good old-fashioned, working-class beer. Then, like many of these stories you've heard us tell, came Prohibition in 1920. Beer production stopped cold. The company had to evolve. They pivoted. They started making malted milk, ice cream, soft drinks, even a near beer called Minnehaha Pale Ale with less than 0.5% alcohol. So when Prohibition ended in 1933, Grain Belt was one of the few Minnesota breweries still standing. They quickly got back on their feet, rebrewing and establishing their place in the market. Post-war America was a good time for Grain Belt. In the 40s and 50s, it became the beer, baseball games, bowling league, fishing trips, anything to do with the outdoors, you had a Grain Belt in your hand. By the 1960s, production peaked at close to 1 million barrels a year. You could find it across the Dakotas, Iowa, Wisconsin, parts of Illinois. They even sponsored a local TV variety show in the Twin Cities, and the Grain Belt jingle was everywhere on Midwest radio. But then, in the 1970s, it brought some challenges. Big brands like Budweiser, Miller, Coors, they flooded the market with massive ad campaigns and aggressive pricing. So finally in 1975, the brewery was sold to the G. Heilemann Brewing out of Wisconsin. A year later, the original Minneapolis brewery was closed. Production had to move elsewhere. The beer was still available, but it was no longer the same. Under Heilemann, and later Stroh's and eventually Pabst got passed around a bit, Grain Belt became just another contract brand, reformulated, sidelined, and barely marketed. By the 1990s, sales had completely collapsed. Then, the story of redemption. In 2002, August Shell Brewing in New Ulm, a family-run brewery since 1860, bought the rights to Grain Belt. They saw something worth saving. Shell's restored much of the heritage of the recipe, improved quality, and leaned into the brand's local roots. It really worked. Grain Belt has been appearing on shelves across Minnesota once again, and in 2010, Shell's introduced Grain Belt Northeast, a darker, maltier version inspired by Northeast Minneapolis. It quickly became their fastest growing beer, and in 2017, they brought back a piece of history. Shell's restored and relit the iconic Grain Belt beer sign overlooking the Mississippi near the Hennepin Avenue Bridge. That neon sign, dark since the 1970s, lit up the skyline once again, and a symbol of the brand was back where it belonged. Today, Grain Belt is a true heritage beer, still brewed by Shell. You can find it in classic stubbies, tall boys, and draft all across Minnesota, a true story of redemption. And more importantly, it's found a new generation of drinkers who appreciate beer with history and real roots. So today we're going to try it, we're going to think about it, and we're going to see what this Midwestern classic is all about. So for the viewer, we had this beer sent directly to us. As far as we can tell, it was kept cold most of the time. In terms of date information of what we're tasting today, this says 9/19/25, which if that's a canned-on date, this baby's like a few days old. I feel like that's probably a Best By date, which could be 6 months, could be 12 months. I don't really know, but the date on the bottom of this can actually says 9/19/25, which as of this filming is like 5 days ago. All right, guys, so here's how the tasting portion of the video typically works. I don't consider this a review per se. I kind of consider it like a thoughtful analysis. I'm not here to give it a score or really even make a buying recommendation. I'm just here to talk about the history of the beer, give you my general impression of it as a professional brewer, and just kind of give you an idea of what I experience. And you can see if that's consistent with your experience, and we can decide whether or not you think Grain Belt is part of your weekly routine. Beautiful can design, classic red, gold, white. I think this looks like phenomenal. I love this classic Pilsner design. It's got a real American feel to it, real utilitarian, but clean fonts, clean design. The condensation on the can looks really cool right now. All in all, beautiful beer. Before the filming, I was trying to figure out what the alcohol content of this beer was, and it's actually not listed, which for a macro lager I find to be incredibly fascinating. My understanding of the TTB requirement is that you don't need to list an alcohol content, and only if you do does it have to be within 0.5% accuracy, but you're not required to list one, I don't think. For interstate shipments though, I think that you are. So this could be that for the Grain Belt that's not distributed outside of Minnesota, they just don't list the alcohol on here. So I do not know the alcohol of what I'm drinking, which is kind of fascinating. I would assume it's somewhere between 4 and 5%. And as I taste it, I'll try to give you guys my thoughts and impressions on that. But here we go. If you guys are new to the channel, welcome. If you're not new to the channel, we're probably drinking this beer because you recommended it after watching the Hamm's video. This has been one of the most requested beers for us to try here on the channel, and we aim to please. So if there's something else we haven't tried that you want to see, light up the comments. And if Grain Belt has impacted your life, or if you have experience with it, please do the same. Wow, beautiful, beautiful, appetizing pour. Look at that. Appears fully filtered, light golden yellow. Hopefully that's showing up on camera. Big, rocky, beautiful looking head. A little bit wispy, but it seems to be sticking around with much comfort. Not a lot of ephemerality to it. Great pour. Great pour. On the nose. Nice. Really grainy. Go figure. It would be disappointing if Grain Belt Premium wasn't grainy. Really grainy nose, wispy, kind of like a white bread wheat cracker nose. Really clean fermentation profile, really mild hop character. A little bit of like citrusy fruit almost on the nose. It smells really, really, really appetizing. Again, if you're new here or if you've been watching the channel, the aroma is not always indicative of the flavor, but if I have to get excited about the flavor based on the aroma, right now, I'm excited. Interesting. Good amount of acetaldehyde in the beer. Good amount of that appley character. And by good amount, I mean a fair amount. If you like that kind of, it's almost like a grapey, appley, green apple cut flavor, fresh green apple, Granny Smith, this beer is loaded with it. A lot of grain character. I get like a crackery, biscuity finish. On the flavor profile, I get very, very, very little hop character. But in the flavor profile itself, it does have that appley character. I think I've said that several times now. It's tasty. Clean, crisp. If I had to guess the alcohol, I would say a little bit richer of a body, a little bit syrupy, not super dry and crisp, a little bit of sweetness. Somewhere between 4.5 and 5. I would be shocked if it was any less than that. So as far as what I think for the drinker, this is all about what you like. This is an objectively unflawed beer. For many people, that acetaldehyde green apple character is a flaw, but in this beer, it's intentional. The beer is packaged flawlessly. It doesn't have any objective off flavors aside from that acetaldehyde. This beer is all about personal preference. Do you like a super clean American light lager that's really just kind of like sweet, crisp with a tiny bit of hop character and no other flavors? Or do you like a really apple forward, kind of green apple flavor with a little bit more sweetness? You're gonna love Grain Belt. But that's the gist, guys. On the nose, crackery malts, grain forward aroma. In the flavor profile, you get a lot of apple, little bit sweet, not super crisp on the finish, but all in all, a very refreshing beer that tastes very different from Hamm's. You're trying to do like the Hamm's versus the Grain Belt comparison, two very opposite ends of the American light lager spectrum. And I think that's probably worthy of a future video. If you want to see that one, hit subscribe. We'll probably do that in the future. It's always good to hear about an American revival story. It's awesome to hear that a beer like Grain Belt has such a passionate group of followers. Like I said, you guys lit the comments up on the Hamm's video about this beer. I'm happy to have tried it. I'm happy that I have a whole other 12-pack that I get to take home with me. Leave your thoughts down below. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.